I'm really looking forward to this next section. About 2 years ago, we went to Redditch for the first time to have our 102nd conference, I believe. Does anyone remember it when we had the Red Arrows guy, Mike Ling, presenting? But also Richard Aucock, who's up next, shared the bill with Mike to tell us about hydrogen fuel cell cars and his own thoughts about the electric vehicles that are on the market, which have mixed reviews. I had an interesting meeting with somebody back end of last week, who 6 months ago was waxing lyrical about his new electric car. When I saw him back end of last week, he wasn't driving it. He got fed up with it. So I'm really looking forward to this because I'm willing that hydrogen fuel cells are getting closer to the market. So can we please give a very, very warm welcome to our friend from Motoring Research. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Great, thank you, Tim, and good afternoon, everyone. Hydrogen, hype or hope? What are fuel cells? When are they coming? And why do they matter? Well, they matter because for larger vehicles, they are important. They're going to fill the gap that electric cars cannot fill. And the technology is coming on a pace, which I hope, if I can get the clicker working, I'm about to show you. Perfect. And this is really well timed. I was preparing my presentation last week and over the weekend. And over the weekend, Rowan Atkinson wrote an article, which some of you may have seen. If you haven't, it's certainly worth checking out the Guardian piece. Rowan Atkinson, he is a comedian and he's an actor, but I remember him back in the day. He used to write for Car Magazine. He's a great writer, he's a great author, and he knows a lot about cars. He summarised what I was going to tell you about electric cars perfectly. One of the quotes, to quote, he said, "Increasingly, I'm feeling that our honeymoon with electric cars is coming to an end. And that's no bad thing. We're realising that a wider range of options need to be explored if we're going to properly address the very serious environmental problems that our use of the motor car has created. Electric cars, zero tailpipe emissions, but they're not completely green, they're not completely clean at the moment. There are still challenges to overcome, and as we scale up electric cars to larger and larger vehicles, those problems are compounded. BMW itself has said that fuel cells, which is an alternative, require significantly fewer critical raw materials than EVs, and fuel cells, I believe, is increasingly becoming seen as an alternative, a complementary technology to electric cars. Not replacement for electric cars, but a complementary technology. The UK has targets to meet. By 2030, regular petrol and diesel cars will be banned, and by 2035, it will be only zero-emission cars that will be allowed to be sold. And this isn't simply electric cars, it's zero-emissions cars. So it includes hydrogen fuel cells because, like electric cars, they deliver zero tailpipe emissions. And I think what's often overlooked, but is a critical point to make, is that this 2035 target includes HGVs up to 26 tonnes, and by 2040, all HGVs have to be zero emissions. Not only that, and this legislation is still going through, consultation has closed 2 weeks ago. If you believe the government target at the moment, by 2024, January next year, there'll be a ZEV mandate in force, which will force car manufacturers to sell a certain proportion of their fleet as zero-emissions vehicles, EVs at the moment, fuel cells in the future, in the build-up to 2030. The targets are pretty severe. Even by next year, 22% of cars and 10% of vans must be zero tailpipe emissions. By 2030, 80% of cars and 70% of vans must be zero tailpipes. It's great if you're a fleet car driver. Many of you here enjoy a company car. You get great tax breaks, benefit in kind benefits for driving an EV, which is why the fleet car sector is, at the moment, 50% EVs. But the retail sector is way, way behind that. And that's because electric cars are expensive, imperfect, and, as Neil said earlier, 18-month waiting lists for many of them. But things are coming along apace. This is the BMW iX5 Hydrogen. B&W is conducting a pilot of 100 of these. They're going to send them all around the world into fleets and governments and other corporate bodies to test them, see how they work. And this is a worldwide project, so it will include Europe and it will include the UK, to see what hydrogen is like in practice. B&W CEO Oliver Zipse, he said, B&W has been swimming against the tide, but the tide is turning, and this car is key to it. As I say, it's going into service this year, and what's significant about this is that it produces 400 horsepower. It does 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, but it also has a range of 330 miles, and it takes 3 minutes to charge, 3 minutes to fill, because you don't have to recharge it, because it is a fuel cell electric vehicle. It's got 2 700 bar tanks made of carbon fibre reinforced plastic. It takes 6 kilograms of hydrogen to fill it up, and that takes 3 minutes. B&W itself says that hydrogen is a versatile energy source, one of the most efficient ways of storing and transporting renewable energies. And fuel cells have the potential to complement battery electric vehicles. Again, B&W is stressing that it's not a replacement for battery electric vehicles, EVs, it's a complementary technology. Also exciting, this is Element 2, and this is a startup UK company that's securing investment. By the end of the year, they hope to have around £100 million of investment. Their tagline is #MakeDieselHistory. They want to establish a network of hydrogen filling stations across the UK. They've already got 30 agreements in place that hope to start construction or go live by the end of 2023. Their idea is to have a national network with 100 miles between stops for HGVs. And they've said that the market is there because only 30% of current operations by trucks at the moment have the needs met by battery electric vehicles. For the rest, the majority, more than 2/3, it's got to be fuel cell. Interestingly, they found that the UK has around 150 truck stops, and by installing 5 nozzles per stop, 5 hydrogen filling stations per stop, they can get pretty comprehensive coverage for all of the UK. Behind that brick wall is a storage area, and how it works, they truck in the hydrogen on 40-foot compressed gas tankers. They reverse them in, they drop them off there into a secure compound, and then basically pumping it to the trucks, and Bob's your uncle. Their business case is based on the fact that trucks consume 50 kilograms of hydrogen a day at £15 per kilogram, and a car consumes around 1 kilogram. So by focusing on trucks, they can really, really quickly make a business case, and they're talking about being profitable within a few years' time. They're very confident, but it's the first real-world concrete example that we've seen to push these things forward. Customers will include Teva, which is a British startup. They make electric trucks, 7.5 tons, but they see the route for vehicles heavier than 7.5 tons as being hydrogen. So this is a hydrogen fuel cell. It's got 350 mile range. It's a 19-ton truck. This one isn't, but they've got a 19-ton truck in development. And they are saying that hydrogen is convenient, affordable, sustainable for truck operators, and a really quick way to scale up their business. And this was shown at the CV show at the NEC earlier this year, and it attracted a huge amount of interest, not simply because it's quite a cool looking truck, but also because they have a very compelling case with it as well. Amazingly, there's even government support for hydrogen. The UK has a hydrogen strategy. The government's plan is for a world-leading hydrogen economy. They want to unlock £4 billion of investment to kickstart the UK hydrogen economy. Talk is of 5 gigawatts of hydrogen production capacity by 2030. And this will replace natural gas in homes and also power transport, particularly the heavy vehicle industry. This report says in the introduction that to be net zero, hydrogen has to form around 25 to 30% of UK energy consumption, mainly blue and green low carbon hydrogen. And if you make hydrogen, there's a rainbow of different colours, but it's blue and green that we need to focus on, because blue is the one that carbon captures the carbon produced during production, and green is the panacea, and that is the one that the government is particularly focusing on. So it's happening. Lots and lots of car companies across Europe are focusing on it. Vehicle fleets are in development, and it's all focused around hydrogen fuel cells, which are really exciting because they are basically an electric vehicle with the electricity produced on board by a hydrogen fuel cell rather than being stored on board in a battery. It works by taking in air, combining it with the H2 on board. Magic happens in a fuel cell stack. It's not actually that magic. The technology has been around for years. The technology actually took people to the moon, and they chose it not because it's clever, but because it's simple and straightforward and super reliable. And the only tailpipe emission is water. Hyundai famously demonstrated this by taking in dirty air, passing it through the car, and it pulled out clean air at the other side. They showed the air filter. It was completely caked in dust and grubby stuff. It works. This was a quite controversial demonstration, but it shows that technology works. And also the other facts, this does actually have a tiny little tailpipe, but that only is there to let out water from the hydrogen stack, because the only byproduct is water, and the water has to go somewhere. So Toyota said in their owner's manual for their Mirai that there's a button on the dashboard that you press, so if you keep your car in a garage, you press the button beforehand so it doesn't leave a pool of water in your garage, which I thought was quite cool. Here's a Toyota, a Mirai. This is one of only 2, sadly, electric cars on sale at the moment. You have to convince Toyota if you want to buy one of these, because they don't actually want to sell you on, because it costs them lots of money. Hyundai is keen to sell you one of these, Nexo. It costs about 65 grand, but still, because the infrastructure isn't there, they have sales in the tens as opposed to the hundreds or thousands. We all know the problems with electric cars. If you have an electric car, you have to park up for half an hour to charge it. The technology at the moment doesn't allow it to be any quicker than that. I test lots of EVs as part of my job, and even the fast charging ones, it has to be in the right conditions and it has to be the right temperature to get really quick charging. The reality is that you're going to be stopped for about half an hour to charge an electric car. Even if you've got 6, 10, 12 charge points, if each vehicle is stopped for half an hour, that means a lot of standing around waiting, whereas with hydrogen, you literally drive in, plug it in, 3 minutes later, it's filled. That is the beauty of a hydrogen fuel cell car, that quick turnaround. And if you compound that and build it up to larger HGVs, the difference in time is like night and day. That's a picture of the filler. It's super simple. There's nothing scary about it. They took us journalists to Germany, because that was the only filling station they had at the time, to show us how to use it. We used it straight away. There was nothing clever about it. And then we basically sat around for the rest of the day drinking coffee, because there was nothing actually clever or advanced about it. Anybody can do it, and it's super simple. This is why hydrogen fuel cells are important for larger vehicles. As you can see, this is a bus, a very nice bus. It's actually an electric bus. Here's some figures. It's got 543 kilowatts of battery, and each time I look at this figure, I find it more laughable. It's crazy how much battery it has. If you think of a Volkswagen ID3, that has around 60 kilowatt hours of batteries, so this has basically 10 times the batteries for a range of 250 miles. That is wild. If you think about all the resources, all the rare earth materials, everything that goes into producing the amount of batteries for one bus, it's wild. It's off the scale. Obviously, to charge them, it takes forever as well, so you have to do it overnight. And if you've got a fast turnaround bus, I don't know how you can factor that in. It requires some very clever fleet management. And the price is twice that of a diesel vehicle. That bus is £400,000. Even a hydrogen, even a fuel cell, old-style London bus, a Boris bus, is £300,000. So this is even more expensive than that. It's crazy, and at the moment, that sort of technology can't be scaled up, because if you put in all of those batteries into a bus, that means you're taking 10 times the resources out of batteries for regular petrol and diesel car replacements. But things are changing and are developing quickly. This has got an Opel badge, but Opel is Vauxhall in Europe. It's the Vauxhall H2 Vivaro, which is a hydrogen fuel cell version of the electric Vivaro van. It's going into trial this year in the UK. It's seen as an alternative to electric vans. Vauxhall itself admits that EVs will still dominate, but fuel cells are going to be increasingly important for fleets, particularly those with return to base operations. Stellantis LCV product head Brad Miller is a very clever guy. He's very switched on, and he said, basically, if we had the choice, we would still choose diesel vans because it's easy and it works. But we can't, because we're not allowed to do that anymore. Fuel cells is the real-world, realistic alternative to diesel vans in a way that electric vans are not. He's actually gone through the figures. Vauxhall is getting a lot of data from this because they already sell electric vans. In terms of medium vans around this sort of size, probably around 90% of operational cycles will work with an EV at a push if you have strict fleet management processes in place. But for larger vans, it's 65%, probably even less than that if you take away the margin of safety. It means that if you switch to electric, there's going to be a lot of hanging around while the things charge, lots of complicated fleet management. And he's admitted that electric vans do compromise fleet operations at the moment, whereas a fuel cell, which you can fill up with hydrogen, will not. It will simply charge it, fill it up, you're good to go. Other developments, this is a Toyota Hilux, and I'm really excited by this. It's being developed in the UK. It's got government funding behind it. The aim is to build it in Burnaston in Derbyshire starting this year, initial pilots, and then look to produce it in greater quantities after that. It uses the fuel cell that the Toyota Mirai runs, so the technology is well proven. Around 60,000 pickups a year are sold in the UK. They're all diesel. You can have an electric pickup, but it just doesn't work because it's too heavy and too compromised for the operations that people want to use pickups for. Whereas this is a complete alternative to a diesel, works really well, really excited, and is going into testing and development this year. Toyota has decades of history with fuel cells. They are looking at fuel cell trucks. They're working with VDL, a Dutch company, and they're putting their fuel cell technology into this. And again, looking to start producing this from the summer. They say it's got faster refueling times, the same as a diesel. And because of the need to very quickly make the HGV sector green and zero emissions, means that infrastructure can roll out quickly, and that will support passenger car vehicles as well. So you can have these trucks being filled up at the example that we saw earlier, and also passenger cars alongside it. Toyota has said that HGVs are critical for the general development of a healthy supply of hydrogen. And this, again, is going into production this summer. The hydrogen is actually stored behind the cab, otherwise it just drives like a regular electric vehicle. And this is quite cool. It isn't just fuel cells. Fuel cells will ultimately be the future, I feel certain. But there is an alternative use for hydrogen as well. It can be used in regular petrol engines instead. You can convert them to run on liquid hydrogen, and this is something that Toyota is doing. They're racing this car overseas in Japan and Europe. The boss, Akio Toyoda, is actually driving it, so he's very well invested in it. It's a quick car, it's an exciting car, and again, they're doing this to see how hydrogen might be able to play a role in decarbonising the regular internal combustion engines. At the moment, I don't think it's as likely as fuel cells, but who knows? the technology is moving on quickly, and we could see developments there. I'll close with INEOS. INEOS, chemical giant, we all know them. They have stated that hydrogen is without doubt the fuel of the future. A truck needs 7 tons of battery to go electric. That's not practical, economical, and it's certainly not environmentally friendly. A fuel cell takes up a fraction of the space, a fraction of the weight, a fraction of the rare earth materials, and the technology is so well proven that it can be deployed straight away with no compromise in how people operate their fleets. Certainly they admit that EVs have an important role to play, but so too do fuel cells, and hydrogen has the power to make a huge and very significant difference to CO2, which is why I think we're going to be hearing more and more exciting news from hydrogen fuel cells in the future, and it certainly is technology to watch, and again, watch this space and see how things develop. Thank you, and any questions? Thank you.
I have a quick question on infrastructure. When we last heard from you, if my memory serves me correctly, there were only a couple of filling stations around the country that had a 40-foot container delivered, and they were actually dispensing the stuff.
Yes.
I think there were plans for 7 service stations back then. Has that improved?
Interestingly, the number of hydrogen filling stations declined over the past year. With this new development, it is going to go up again. So there are plans for about 30 in the UK. A lot of those early hydrogen filling stations were sort of first generation development, so they had a finite life because they didn't get the throughput of vehicles. There was no budget to replace them, so they simply had to close. So yeah, the numbers have gone down, but they are starting to go up, and by the end of this year we should hopefully have around 30, if not live, certainly in development.
And one assumes that people running fleets will have their own.
That is the idea. The idea is return to depot for HGVs and vans. So again, you can invest and have your own infrastructure in place. As that filling station demonstrated, it is a matter of essentially, not quite that simple, but reversing in a truck. As soon as it's empty, you get a new truck, and Bob's your uncle. That is the idea and the objective. Yes, sir.
How's the hydrogen produced?
It's produced in lots of different ways. Electrolysis mainly. INEOS has some quite clever and advanced ideas to produce green hydrogen via renewable energy sources and things. As I say, there was a rainbow of different ways. The bad sort is brown hydrogen and black hydrogen, which is made by coal and oil and things. Carbon capture is blue hydrogen, but the electrolysis with renewable fuels is the panacea, and that certainly is what INEOS wants to roll out at scale in the UK.
Would that be one or multiple massive plants, or would that be done at the filling point?
It can be done at the fillet point. Certainly, the example that we saw in Europe, that had on-site production. I think in terms of doing it at scale, INEOS wants to do it at a big factory and then ship it across. But there is certainly, the technology exists to do it on-site as well. So that is certainly a feasible option.
Where do you see that shipping, cruise liners, airplanes, aviation, big polluters, some of the biggest around the world?
That's true, and there's certainly plans for aviation and hydrogen. There's lots of work going underway at the moment. I think they have a few greater safety challenges to overcome, just in terms of reassurance to people, but it's certainly an option. Shipping, I don't know. They're very behind the curve, so yeah, I think there's some way to go for them.
Thank you, Richard.
Brilliant. Thank you.